In this video, I want to talk about staying up to date with your FileMaker software, or maybe choosing not to stay up to date with your FileMaker software, and what that means for you. Now, first off, as a FileMaker developer, I have to generally stay up to date with FileMaker. We provide training on the FileMaker platform, and it's really hard for me to provide training on new features if I don't use it. So I really don't have a choice. I have to stay up to date with it. However, not everyone sees it that way, especially if you're used to the model of buying the software once and then never reinvesting in that software again. And I would tell you that's a very misleading concept or idea. Someday, if you buy or own a house or you buy or own a car, you understand that there's always a level of maintenance that needs to go into that house, into that vehicle. If you don't spend the money to maintain it, then the vehicle or house eventually becomes broke down, things in it don't work correctly, they're out of date, and that causes your property or item to lose value. Eventually to the point where the car or vehicle won't operate anymore, or maybe the house is uninhabitable because maybe you have rain leaking through the roof and it's causing things inside to rot or mold. So in life, anything that you buy or invest in a vast majority of cases, you're going to have to reinvest in that technology. Software is no different. If you build a FileMaker solution and say it costs you $5,000 or $10,000 or $50,000, whatever it is, to build that FileMaker solution, as a loose rule, you should expect to spend about 10% of that cost every year in maintenance. And so, of course, you're asking yourself, well, what is this 10%? And how come no one told me about this? And what am I buying if I spend that 10%? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The idea is that if you build a FileMaker solution that supports your business, and assuming that your business never changes, let's assume that your business is static, you have a great process, it makes money, or it's very efficient, and your model never changes, then every year new computers come out that are Windows-based or Apple-based, etc. And of course, people wear out older computers, so they're going to buy new computers. And those new computers almost always come with updated software. And the FileMaker software has to be updated to run on it too. And so part of this is that you're going to, at some point, be forced to update to newer computers, newer operating systems, and your version of FileMaker has to be updated. So first off, you have to look at the cost of keeping up to date with FileMaker. That's one expense. Now, if you have a really big FileMaker system, that's probably a minor part of your overall expense. Some people pay $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 to build out a FileMaker solution, and they spend maybe $800 or $1,500 on the FileMaker software every year. So really, the FileMaker licensed software is a smaller piece of the overall project. Now, if you haven't spent a lot of money building your FileMaker software, then you've probably invested a lot of time. So when I talk about money, if you want to convert that to time because you did it yourself and it was a volunteer effort, then you can convert that to time. However, in general, with most situations, there's a pretty big investment in building the solution, a much smaller investment in licensing the software. The second expense is that if you have a FileMaker solution that's working just great on a specific version of FileMaker and you need to update it, there's always going to be little edits to things that you need to do to make sure that it works great with the new version of FileMaker. From release to release, sometimes nothing is broke and it works great moving forward. In fact, that's mostly what happens. However, if you're using web publishing or you're connecting with APIs to talk to PayPal or you talk to Slack or you talk to text messaging or things like that, then those processes need to be tested and looked at as you update from one version of FileMaker to the next version of FileMaker. So if you're going to do that review yourself and fix that yourself when it breaks, then that's a time investment. If you're going to hire someone, then you're going to put money into that. So in summary with this, it's important to understand that computers wear out. You're going to need a new computer. Because you have a new computer, you'll have a new operating system. Because you have a new operating system, you need a new version of FileMaker. And then you're going to have to make sure your solution works with that new version of FileMaker. That's where that 10% per year comes in. It's a loose number. It could be less than that. It could be more than that, depending upon the complexity of your FileMaker solution. So understand that as you build a solution, there has to be this continuous maintenance. Now, some of you have heard me refer to the concept as technical debt. And technical debt is when you should invest in some technology, but you kind of defer it. It's like a credit card where you keep running up the bill, but you're not paying off the balance back to the credit card company so you're in debt. And the more that you spend on that credit card over time and you don't pay off, that debt on that credit card gets bigger and bigger, and it can become almost insurmountable. The other day, one of my kids was playing with a game that had long since kind of gone out of business and then was resuscitated because everyone was stuck at home because of this virus thing. And the online game is called Club Penguin. It's this kind of social environment for kids. It's supposed to be very kid safe. So if people say bad words or they're mean to you, you get banned out of the game. So it's for a bunch of 8, 9, 10-year-olds to socialize, and they have a little penguin and they do things with the penguin. Well, what's interesting about this game is I was watching it unfold and I suddenly realized it was a great analogy for the situation. When you build a FileMaker solution, you're very much like at the North Pole on the ice with the penguin. You're up to date, everything is great, everything's running well. What happens is that every year the temperatures change and part of the ice breaks off. And as it floats south through the Atlantic Ocean, it starts to melt. So if a new version of FileMaker comes out and you're on the ice, then it's going to be pretty easy for you to walk over to the latest, freshest ice and to upgrade your solution and stay there. It's the happy spot where everything works and you're up to date. However, if you really don't want to put the work into moving across the ice and you just kind of want to hang out with what you have, that's fine. Your piece of ice will kind of break off, version 17 or 18 or 19 or whatever version of FileMaker that you have, it's going to start floating south. So as it starts to float south, you're getting farther and farther away from really the North Pole where you want to be. And so you're thinking, well, it's no big deal. I'm on the ice. It's great. I can see the main block of ice right there. If I want to swim there, it'll be easy. Now, if you wait another year or two, you're farther away. And if you want to swim back to the North Pole, it's going to be more work and more effort. And it starts to stress you out a little bit because you know in the back of your mind, you really should be there because you know someday that ice is going to be melted and you're not going to be standing on ice. You're going to be floating in the water. Now, you are a penguin. That's okay. But does a penguin really want to swim 2,000 miles to get back to the North Pole? That's a long swim. And so as it flows farther south and farther south, you're getting yourself into a situation where you're on version, say, 15 of FileMaker, and there's version 20. And basically, you have to jump 5 versions to bring your solution up to date. That will take more testing, more investigation, more bug fixing. And along the way, some of your processes may have broke. Maybe you were using PayPal. It doesn't work anymore. PayPal's still in business. FileMaker's still in business, but your software doesn't work anymore because it just quit working. And that's that reinvestment. So the swim back to the North Pole is your reinvestment. You don't want to do it if you don't have to, but if you do a little bit every year and you stay up to date with it, then you don't have this big, long, giant swim that you're going to have to perform. And that's really the analogy here. The more you put it off, the harder it will be down the road. I received 3 calls in the last 6 months from 3 different people who were using FileMaker version 4 and 5, I believe. They wanted to hire me to help them move their penguin from FileMaker 4 and 5 up to FileMaker 19. And to be honest with you, we didn't have a boat that would go that far. It was so far. We told them that you had to kill the penguin and get a new penguin at the ice because we couldn't swim it that far. It was such a far way to go that it was better to just recreate it from scratch and build it all over again. So you lost your entire initial investment. You just rebuild it from scratch. And of course, they didn't like that, but I'm not the one who decided to defer the upgrade for more than 25 years. That's 25 years of floating south. And so you should be doing a little investment every year. Eventually, 5 or 6 years down the road, it's going to take a lot more effort, a lot more money. And if you wait a very long time, you just can't get there at all. What you have is a throwaway and it cannot be salvaged. So just keep that in mind. My recommendation is for customers to upgrade either every year or every other year. With some of our systems internally, we upgrade depending on the situation every 1 year or every 2 years. And so our servers upgrade every other year because that's a lot more work, but our FileMaker clients, we upgrade every year. And so just understand that that's a really solid position to be in, but I've determined that's kind of the sweet spot, at least for me, my comfort level. And so just think about it from your perspective, what you want to do on that. Try to minimize that technical debt, minimize that distance between where you're at and where you need to be. If you make little investments along the way, you'll be much happier.